Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a stack of research, some really fascinating notes actually, and boiling them down for you. And the topic, well, it's something that honestly I think hits closer to home for a lot of us than we might want to admit. It's about how to really thrive, find happiness, purpose in the second half of life, especially when maybe it feels like your biggest professional achievements are, well, kind of behind you. And to start, I have to share this story from our source material. It really, it stuck with me. So picture this. I'm on a late night flight, right? Most people are out. And I hear this woman in the row behind me, sounded pretty exasperated, saying to her husband, "It's not true that no one needs you anymore." And this man. Turns out he's this huge hero figure, someone everyone knows, famous for decades of incredible accomplishments. He just says, "I might as well be dead." I mean, the cognitive dissonance. I knew who this guy was, an icon. And hearing that, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. It made me think about my own list, the professional goals I set back when I was 40. And I'd hit them, even blew past some of them. But the deep, lasting satisfaction I thought would be there, it wasn't quite landing. And I thought, wow, could I keep this pace up? Was I maybe heading for that same kind of cliff without realizing it?
And that right there, that's really the heart of what we're exploring in this deep dive for you. We want to understand why. Why can hitting all the marks of traditional success sometimes lead to this kind of, well, despair later on? But more than just the why, we're looking at a path forward. A strategic way, really, to build a second half of adulthood that our sources argue can be happier and more meaningful than the first. This isn't just about coping, or making the best of things. It's genuinely about learning how to go from strength to strength.
Okay, so let's unpack that. This surprising truth about professional decline. Because it's not just elite athletes, is it? The sources seem pretty clear.
Oh, absolutely not. They're quite stark, actually.
For most of us, it happens much, much sooner than we think.
Far sooner. The research points to practically every high-skill profession seeing some kind of noticeable decline setting in sometime between one's late 30s and early 50s. And look, if you've really tied your identity up in your professional achievements, that can sting. It can be genuinely tough to hear.
Tough is putting it mildly. It feels like it goes against everything we assume about careers. You gain experience, you learn more.
Yeah.
So why the decline?
Well, it's about a specific kind of ability declining. Let's take Charles Darwin. Incredible figure. On the Origin of Species at age 50, right? Yeah. Monumental. But then later in life, he actually found his own work, quote, unsatisfying, unsatisfactory, and unoriginal. He even confessed, "Life has become very wearisome to me."
Wow.
Yeah. So despite this immense success the world saw by his own very high standards, he felt, well, washed up.
Darwin felt washed up. That's kind of staggering. We still talk about him constantly.
Exactly. Or think about P.A.M. Dirac, Nobel Prize winner at 31, for work he did in his mid-20s. And he famously wrote, he is better dead than living still once he has passed his 30th year.
Good grief.
Right. His biggest, most groundbreaking physics breakthroughs were behind him, even though he stayed a brilliant, active scholar for many, many more years.
So it's not like they just lose their minds or stop being smart.
Yeah.
It's more a shift in how that intelligence works or what it's best suited for.
Precisely. And this pattern points to what our source calls a double whammy. You've got this innate human drive for more and more success just to feel satisfied. Combine that with these declining fluid abilities we'll talk about, and you end up on this kind of hamster wheel of success, which ironically often leads straight to unhappiness. So it really begs the question, why does this pattern show up so often, even with these incredibly brilliant people?
And the answer, I think, brings us to something really crucial, this idea of two different types of intelligence. It's like thinking of your mind as this huge library, right? But maybe there are two different librarians inside. Understanding them is key, apparently, to navigating the shift and finding what the source calls your second curve.
That library analogy works really well. So Raymond Cattell, he identified these two types. First, there's fluid intelligence. Our source calls this the young killer's intelligence, which is pretty vivid. It's your raw ability to solve new problems, reason quickly, learn things fast. It relies a lot on the prefrontal cortex, and it tends to peak early. For most people, it starts declining somewhere in middle age. This impacts that rapid analysis and creative innovation. Think fast coding, quick abstract problem solving.
Right. So if your job is all about that cutting edge, that constant rapid innovation, like maybe a tech startup or pure mathematics, that decline could feel really, really stark, like hitting a wall.
It absolutely can feel that way. But then there's the second type, crystallized intelligence. This is your ability to use the knowledge, the experience, the vocabulary you've built up over decades. This is our wise, experienced librarian, maybe not the fastest anymore, but knows exactly where everything is. And crucially, knows how to connect different ideas, see the bigger picture, make judgments based on experience. And here's the key thing. This type of intelligence actually increases with age. It keeps growing, often through your 60s and 70s.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me, because that distinction, it just opens up this huge opportunity, doesn't it? It suggests a whole different strategy, not fighting the tide of declining fluid intelligence, but actually leaning into and using your growing crystallized intelligence, jumping to that second curve.
Exactly right. It's about shifting your focus, not trying to be the young killer forever when your natural strengths are actually evolving. You see this happen naturally in some fields. Think about historians. They often produce their most profound work late in life, into their 80s even. Why? Because their craft demands that huge base of accumulated knowledge and the wisdom to interpret it.
That makes total sense. Connecting dots across decades, centuries even, that takes time.
It really does. And it's not just historians. There was a recent study showing older college professors, especially in humanities, often get the best teaching evaluations. Students value their experience, their wisdom. Or look at J.S. Bach. When new musical styles started coming in, even from his own son, C.P.E. Bach. He didn't just, despair that he wasn't the cutting-edge innovator anymore. He pivoted. He became this incredible master teacher his last decade, spent composing the art of fugue. It's basically described as a textbook, but so beautiful it's considered literature. And he died, beloved, fulfilled, respected as this master instructor. He found a new strength.
That's such a powerful story of redefining mastery. It really drives home the point that this second curve isn't just settling. It's not making the best of a bad lot. It's a genuine, different kind of opportunity that really only comes later in life, using strengths that have been building quietly all along.
Okay, so if this amazing second curve is there, full of potential, leveraging wisdom, why is it so hard? Why do so many really successful people, these strivers, struggle so much to make that jump? Like the man on the plane, and it's like about all that achievement, but ending up miserable. What's blocking the path?
Well, a big part of it is what our sources call the success addiction. And it's tricky because, unlike other addictions, society tends to cheer this one on. One piece is self-objectification. It's when you start reducing yourself, your whole identity, down to just one or two things people envy, like your money, your power, maybe even how you look. There's this quote in the source from a financier, really stark. He says, "Maybe I would prefer to be special rather than happy."
Wow. Special rather than happy. That cuts deep. Do you think that's common, even if people don't say it out loud? I think it's disturbingly common, yeah, because our culture rewards special so much. And it often gets tangled up with workaholism. That term came from Wayne Oates, a psychologist. He called it a compulsion or an uncontrollable need to work incessantly. He even had these diagnostic questions like, do you sneak around to work?
Sneak around.
Yeah, or does it make you anxious and unhappy when someone suggests you take time away? It becomes this vicious cycle. Work pushes out relationships, which makes you lonelier, maybe more fearful, so you work even more.
And that work gives you those little hits, right? The dopamine bumps from success, momentary relief from maybe, like you said, a grim baseline mood.
Exactly. You see it even in historical figures. People like Churchill, Lincoln. Some argue they used obsessive work partly to manage deep melancholy. But chasing those hits leads straight onto the hedonic treadmill, where satisfaction is fleeting, alas, but an instant. So you have to run faster and faster, achieve more and more just to feel okay, especially as those fluid abilities start to decline, making it harder to keep up. It's exhausting.
So just adding more achievements, more stuff to the list, clearly isn't the path to lasting happiness. What's the alternative then? The sources suggest a really different way of thinking.
They really do. It contrasts the typical Western idea, the empty canvas you keep adding things to, like a bucket list, with a more Eastern philosophy concept. Think of yourself not as a canvas, but as an uncarved block of jade. The masterpiece, your true self, is already in there. The work isn't adding, it's chipping away everything that isn't essential. It's subtractive.
Chipping away instead of adding more. That feels so radically different from how we're trained to think about goals and life building. What's the hardest part for people trying to adopt that perspective?
I think it's letting go of that identity that's tied purely to external stuff, the job title, the bank account, the accolades. We're so conditioned to think more is better. But the source offers some practical ways to start chipping away. One idea is the reverse bucket list.
Okay, what's that?
So each year you list the worldly things you crave: money, power, pleasure, honor. These come from thinkers like Thomas Aquinas and Buddhist principles. And then you consciously choose to detach from them. You really imagine yourself happy and at peace 5 years from now, and then you ask, which of these desires I'm chasing are actually preventing me from getting there?
That's really interesting. It's actively letting go of the things you think you want, but maybe don't actually need for real fulfillment.
Exactly. And another approach is simpler. Just get smaller. This means deliberately shifting your focus, finding joy and meaning in the smaller things in life. Like Voltaire said, cultivate our garden. Or Thich Nhat Hanh talking about being mindful, just washing the dishes. The source mentions this moment of just watching a blue passion flower bloom for 10 minutes in silence and finding this deep, quiet satisfaction from that tiny, beautiful event that maybe outweighed some huge professional win. These small, unexpected joys can be more enduring.
So, okay, we start chipping away. We detach from the relentless chase for more external stuff. What then? What are the core things we should be building or focusing on for that fulfilling second curve?
Well, the number one thing, according to the research, is relationships. It's almost impossible to overstate this. You know that Harvard study of adult development? The longest-running study on happiness? Their conclusion after decades was crystal clear. Good relationships keep us happier and healthier, period. George Vaillant, who ran it for years, summed it up. Happiness is love. Full stop.
Full stop. Wow.
Yeah, and there's this lovely aspen grove metaphor used in the source. Aspen trees look like separate individuals above ground, right? But underneath, they share this vast interconnected root system. We're like that. We need connection. Isolation isn't just sad, it's dangerous and damaging because it is unnatural.
And we hear so much about the loneliness epidemic today. It feels very real.
It's huge, and it has serious health consequences. The source makes a pointed note for workaholics. Chances are your spouse is lonely and suffering because of that imbalance. So the work is cultivating companionate love and partnerships that stable affection, mutual understanding, the deep friendship part that lasts, and beyond romance, nurturing real friends, not just deal friends.
Those friends, deal friends.
Yeah, I know what that means.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a good distinction. And things like men's sheds are popping up, places for guys to connect through shared activities, kind of like parallel play, rebuilding those friendship muscles.
Okay, so relationships are paramount. What else forms the foundation of this second curve? The sources point next to spirituality. They connect it to an ancient Indian concept, vanaprastha. It's one of the ashramas, or life stages. This stage is specifically about purposefully pulling back from some worldly duties to really devote yourself to spirituality and deep wisdom, crystallized intelligence, teaching, and faith. It provides the metaphysical context of the second curve. It also links up with James Fowler's work on the stages of faith. As people mature, they often become more comfortable with ambiguity, paradox, and find a deeper kind of beauty in faith, maybe their original faith, maybe something new.
That provides such a rich framework for thinking about growth in later life. But what stops people? What are the usual roadblocks to exploring that spiritual dimension?
Well, the sources mention a few common ones. There's the Nicodemus syndrome, basically being afraid to question beliefs you've held for a long time, even if they don't quite fit anymore. There's Santa in the church holding on to very childish, simplistic ideas about faith that don't mature with you. And then there's just the tyranny of time, always putting spiritual growth last on the to-do list. But things like, say, walking pilgrimages, the Camino de Santiago is a famous example, can really help. That walking meditation, the focus on the present, can carve out space for it.
Right. And then there's this last piece, which, especially for high achievers, feels really counterintuitive, making your weakness your strength. That just sounds wrong somehow.
It really does, doesn't it? Especially if you've built your life on being the strong one, the capable one. But think about St. Paul. He talked about this thorn in his flesh, some persistent weakness. But he didn't see it just as a hindrance. He famously said, "For when I am weak, then I am strong." He saw it as a source of divine power, paradoxically. And our sources argue that it's through acknowledging our weaknesses, not projecting constant strength, that we make deep human connection. Your fancy credentials might impress, but they don't make you relatable. Vulnerability does.
That's a massive shift. Letting go of the need to always appear perfect.
It is. Think about Beethoven, a composer, going deaf. I mean, talk about a cruel fate. But what happened? Instead of giving up, it forced him to compose entirely only in his imagination. This led to his most original, groundbreaking romantic work. It completely changed music. His greatest perceived weakness arguably became his unique strength. Embracing this mindset means, as the source says, you can finally relax a little. Stop pretending. Sharing vulnerability isn't weakness. It's actually a kind of superpower for connection.
Okay, as we wrap this up, there's one more metaphor from the sources I really liked. Casting into the falling tide. Seems backward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fishing when the tide's rushing out.
Totally counterintuitive.
But apparently that's when all the nutrients, the plankton, the bait fish get stirred up, and the bigger game fish go crazy, looking to bite. It's described as this intensely productive and fertile period, perfect for jumping curves.
Exactly. That falling tide, that's what psychologists call liminality. It's that in-between space during uncomfortable life transitions. Dante called it the forest dark. It feels messy, uncertain. But it's also a time of huge potential because things are uncertain, things are shifting. It connects back to the idea of impermanence, something Marcus Aurelius talked about, the Buddha taught. Everything changes. And understanding this helps challenge that whole midlife crisis narrative. Yes, transitions are real and inevitable, the source says, but a full-blown crisis is not. Most people actually look back on these transitions as positive, ultimately.
So it's less about crisis management and more about opportunity recognition, even when it feels uncomfortable. Are there examples of people navigating this well?
Oh, sure. Historically, think of Cincinnatus, the Roman leader who saved Rome, then willingly went back to his farm. Or the author mentions his own family, his grandfather switching careers from ministry at 49, his father getting a PhD in biostatistics at 40 after teaching math. These were huge resets, sure, but definitely not crises. And today, you have resources like the Modern Elder Academy, which specifically helps people navigate this, helps them define their next charter, focusing on evolving, letting go, learning new things, leaning into that liminal space.
So the real mistake during this falling tide isn't the tide itself, but maybe not having your line in the water. The key is to actually cast into the falling tide, engage with the change, don't just resist it, redefine things.
Absolutely. It might mean accepting a career path that isn't linear, but more of a spiral. Like the example given, a hedge fund manager becoming a middle school history teacher. The advice is pretty blunt. Don't think, dude. Just jump. Embrace the transition.
Wow, what a journey we've covered in this deep dive. Started with that kind of scary realization about professional decline, but ended up exploring this really hopeful, liberating path, leveraging crystallized intelligence, shedding that success addiction, focusing on what truly matters, relationships, maybe spirituality, even finding strength and weakness. It's counterintuitive, but feels right.
And if there's one core takeaway, one distillation of all this, the source offers 7 words to remember. Use things, love people, worship the divine.
Use things, love people, worship the divine.
Yeah. And it's not saying, reject material things entirely. The crucial word is love. We should use things, but love people. When we start loving things, money, power, pleasure, prestige, those become idols. And idols, the source is clear, will not make you happy. The work is to break down their altars in our lives.
That brings me right back to the beginning, that man on the plane. When I first heard that story, I felt, pity maybe, and fear for myself. But hearing all this, now I actually feel gratitude towards him. For the lesson he unknowingly taught the author and maybe taught us today, it sparked this whole exploration. So the question for you listening is maybe this: how can you right now in your own life start to gently break down some of those altars? How can you reorient your energy, your choices, your love towards what really endures so that you too can look back eventually with peace and maybe even joy? May you go from strength to strength.